The phone didn't just break, it detonated. It hit the wall with a sound so sharp, half the room flinched. I swear, time froze. The spotlight above flickered as if even the building couldn't handle what had just happened. Sophia Calloway stood center stage, her heels rooted like steel stakes, her eyes twin laser beams of rage. The remnants of her phone, once gold-plated and monogrammed, slid across the marble floor in slow, almost cinematic motion. Guests fell silent. Not even the string quartet dared to continue. Somewhere near the bar, a PR intern dropped her wine glass. No one noticed. All eyes were on Sophia, who was now panting, her chest rising and falling like she'd just run a marathon. She looked unrecognizable. This wasn't the picture-perfect CEO featured on the covers of Fortune and Vogue business. This wasn't the woman with flawless speeches and meticulously coordinated designer outfits. This was someone else, raw, unraveling, dangerous. And it all started with a banner. A shade too bright. A color correction that went unnoticed in a rush of deadlines and late-night revisions. Just a hue, one wrong hue. I was the one who approved the final proof. Me. I clicked, okay, after 30 hours without sleep and 4 straight cappuccinos. I didn't know that click would trigger a chain reaction that would cost us $50,000. That it would shatter reputations, rupture relationships, and send one of the most powerful women in tech into a spiral so dramatic, it would become the stuff of industry legend. But the truth is, the banner wasn't the real problem. It was only the first crack in a polished, fragile world that had been trembling for years. And that night, everything finally collapsed. 1 week before the collapse, the atmosphere inside our office felt like a storm cloud pressing down on a glass house. Everyone was moving faster but quieter, a kind of subdued frenzy. Coffee cups shook on tabletops. People started whispering even when there was no one around to hear them. If anxiety had a sound, it was the constant clicking of keyboards interrupted only by long, exhausted sighs. It was supposed to be the beginning of something brilliant. The product we were launching, sleek, smart, endlessly hyped, had the potential to place us in the center of a global conversation. Investors were circling with interest that smelled like power. Media outlets already had their embargoed press releases in hand. The venue had been secured 6 months in advance, and the branding team had pored over every asset until their eyes went bloodshot. The buzz, from the outside, must have looked electric. Inside, it felt more like voltage with nowhere to ground. At the center of it all was Sophia Calloway, founder, CEO, and undisputed sovereign of everything within her reach. She didn't walk through a room so much as she pierced through it. Her presence was absolute, and she made sure of it. Every element of the launch was hers. From the typeface used in the event programs down to the scent piped into the lobby air vents, nothing escaped her grip. Control wasn't a management strategy for her. It was religion. People admired her, but not comfortably. Her perfectionism wasn't the inspiring kind. It was the kind that made people sleep with their phones on loud, jump at the sight of a Slack notification, and keep changes to themselves until they were 150% sure. If someone made a decision without her sign-off, even a small one, it could result in a stare that stripped her confidence like paint thinner. Sophia didn't explode when something went wrong. Not at first. She seated in silence, letting the weight of her disappointment linger in the room like a thick fog. It was more effective than yelling. People bent over backwards to avoid the stillness she brought when things slipped from perfect. And yet, despite all that, we wanted to impress her. Maybe it was the way she talked about the company, like it wasn't just a brand, but a legacy. Or the way she made you feel that being part of this moment, this launch, would define your career. It didn't matter that we were running on caffeine and cortisol. We believed in the vision. Or at least, we wanted to. My role was Senior Event Coordinator. That title, under normal conditions, came with a team, a workflow, and clear deliverables. But under Sophia's reign, it meant something entirely different. It meant being her second set of eyes, her unspoken instinct, her safety net. It meant catching problems before she even sensed them and resolving them without creating noise. It meant accepting that no matter how hard you worked, she might still rip it all apart and start again at midnight. I kept 3 backup plans for everything. Printed schedules taped inside my blazer. Emergency kits with extra charger cables, protein bars, and throat spray. I wasn't planning an event. I was managing the emotional terrain of a woman who tolerated no missteps. Sophia didn't sleep. Not really. She'd send emails at 3:17 a.m., and if you didn't respond by 3:25, you'd get a follow-up. Her energy was limitless, and her standards impossible. What made it worse was the quiet suffering you could see but weren't allowed to acknowledge. Her husband, Eli, was a constant presence, quiet, polished, and increasingly ghost-like. He came to every pre-launch meeting but rarely spoke. He stood at the back of the room, usually near a wall, watching her with a look that was hard to read. There was love there, somewhere, but it was buried under fatigue and resignation. I once passed by him in a hallway late at night after a schedule run-through. He looked like a man who had seen this all before: the long hours, the spiraling stress, the slow, cold implosion of something once beautiful. His eyes weren't angry or sad. They were simply done. Vendors were on edge. I had to calm down a graphic designer who was hyperventilating in a stairwell after Sophia rejected a sixth round of mock-ups with nothing more than a shrug. The caterer replaced their head chef after a tasting that ended with Sophia silently pushing the plate away and leaving the room. The florist nearly backed out after she demanded live orchid walls in January. No one wanted to disappoint her. Everyone did anyway. Even the venue staff, a seasoned team used to high-end, high-stress events, started whispering about how this one feels cursed. Still, we march forward. Because that's what people do when they're caught in the gravity of something bigger than themselves. You don't stop. You don't breathe. You keep climbing. You tell yourself that all the madness will be worth it when the lights come on, the press leans in, and the applause rises. But deep down, something didn't sit right. I started noticing little things, the way people started avoiding eye contact when Sophia entered a room, the subtle shift in posture from her assistant whenever her name popped up on caller ID. No one was thriving. People were surviving. Every team was stretched thin, too afraid to speak up, too exhausted to care. There was no space for mistakes, no room for human error. And that's why it all unraveled the way it did. Not because of one wrong color, not because of a late delivery or a tripped wire, but because we had built something fragile out of pressure and silence. And sooner or later, something always cracks. The first crack didn't look like a disaster. It didn't scream. It didn't bleed. It arrived quietly, the way real trouble always does, in an email with a cheerful subject line. The final signage proofs had come in. A minor task in the grand scheme, but nothing was minor in Sophia's world. The launch banner would hang above the main stage, visible to every journalist, investor, and influencer within 100 feet. A digital version would be projected across the side of the venue, cast in 20-foot high clarity for the live stream. I should have flagged it. It was a color correction issue, a tiny shift in hue that made the logo background just a shade too vibrant. It didn't clash, exactly. But it didn't match the approved palette either. It threw off the symmetry in a way that only someone with Sophia's eyes would notice instantly, and someone like me should have. But I was running on fumes. It was hour 32 of back-to-back finalization meetings, and I told myself it was fine, that no one would care, that it would read as energy, not error. I approved it. I clicked send. The email timestamp was 2:03 a.m. I remember because I stared at it for a full minute after hitting send, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. Somewhere inside, a part of me had flinched, the kind of instinct that gets louder the more you ignore it. By morning, the file was already with the printers. By that afternoon, the banner was mounted, and Sophia hadn't seen it yet. The day was a blur of rehearsals, deliveries, lighting tests. The ballroom was transforming polished floors, mirrored pillars, a lighting rig worthy of a stadium show. 1,000 tiny miracles were falling into place. But the more perfect it looked, the more brittle it felt. Staff avoided eye contact. Some whispered behind coffee cups, their hands trembling. One assistant, usually composed to the point of robotic, quietly broke down in the loading dock. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. Everyone knew. And Sophia? She hadn't cracked yet, but something was different. Her movements were tighter. Her voice, sharper. She was in full surveillance mode, scanning everything, noticing dust on things that had just been wiped, questioning decisions that had already been triple-checked. Her energy was coiled, ready to strike. That night, I caught a glimpse of her in the mirrored column near the stage. She was standing alone, staring up at the mounted banner. Not moving. Just watching it. I couldn't tell what she was thinking, but her body was perfectly still, the kind of stillness that comes before something explodes. No one spoke to her. Not even Eli, who was standing a few feet away, holding 2 champagne flutes and pretending he wasn't being ignored. I told myself it was fine, that if it hadn't been mentioned by now, maybe we'd escaped. Maybe she'd missed it. Maybe her focus was too fractured to catch one slip of color. But Sophia never missed anything. And when she did see it, really see it, there would be no undoing it. What I didn't realize yet was that the mistake itself wasn't the threat. The threat was what the mistake represented. It was proof that control, no matter how obsessive, how relentless, could not seal the cracks forever. It was the whisper behind the curtain saying, "Look closer. Something is not right here." And soon, everyone would see it. The morning of the launch was blinding. Not just the lights, which bathed the venue in a calculated, crystalline glow, but the energy. The kind of electric, high-strung buzz that masks fear with adrenaline. Everything gleamed. Every inch of the ballroom screamed intentionality. Nothing out of place. Nothing left to chance. At least, that's how it looked. Sophia arrived early, though not as early as me. I had been there since before dawn, smoothing linens and straightening badges and talking to myself like a madwoman. Everything was ready. Except I wasn't. By then, I had already memorized the banner. Not because I loved it, but because I hated it. The moment I stepped into the hall and looked up at that huge, off-hue mistake hovering like a dare above the main stage, I felt it, the clench in my stomach, the whisper that I had missed something sacred. And yet, there was nothing to be done. It was printed, mounted, and photographed. It had been featured on 3 influencer Instagram stories before 8 a.m. The wrong version was already immortalized. The guests poured in. Industry titans, venture capitalists, media heavyweights, micro-celebrities with massive reach. The kind of people who measured worth in metrics and judged failure with a single raised brow. Sophia held court near the entrance, poised and polished in a tailored ivory suit. Her energy had transformed. She was luminous, in that dangerous way diamonds can be luminous, beautiful, but capable of cutting deep. No one saw what was coming. The program began. Lights dimmed. Music pulsed. The screen glowed with promise. The audience leaned in. And then the projection hit the wall. 20 feet tall. Backlit. High resolution. The banner. The one with the error. It took Sophia less than a second. Her eyes snapped upward. Her jaw tightened. I watched the moment her breath caught. A near-invisible hesitation, but unmistakable to those who'd spent months decoding her moods. She froze, and then she turned. Not to anyone in particular, just away. A pivot. A shift. The first tremor. The MC kept talking. Cameras kept rolling. The crowd was oblivious. But inside the eye of the storm, we all knew the countdown had started. It happened backstage. I was behind the curtain, monitoring cues, headset humming with comms, when the eruption hit. I didn't see her face, but I felt the shrapnel. People scattered. A table overturned. A clipboard flew. A mic was cut mid-sentence. The sound was muffled by the thick velvet drapes, but I heard enough. The clipped, furious cadence of someone who had spent too long chasing flawless, only to be confronted by real. Someone tried to calm her. I think it was Eli. But his presence had become decorative by that point, like the oversized floral arrangements no one dared move. He might as well have been a ghost. The fallout was fast and loud. The event didn't stop, but its heart stopped beating in rhythm. Staff disappeared. Some left the building entirely. One tech lead walked straight out the back entrance and didn't return. Sophia eventually returned to the stage, but something in her had changed. Her movements were jerky, her smile mechanical. She stammered once, something I had never seen her do, and caught herself by gripping the podium with both hands, as if steadying a sinking ship. The launch limped forward, but it was no longer an event. It was a performance on life support. Afterward, the building emptied faster than it had filled. No post-show buzz. No celebratory glasses of champagne. Just silence. And then, slowly, whispers. The banner became a meme within hours. Screenshots flew across Twitter. The error was dissected by brand strategists and color theory fanatics. The most popular post read, Sophia Calloway's billion-dollar launch, brought to you by Pantone regret #F44336. And the money? The sponsorship that was contingent on the projection alignment and visual consistency? Gone. $50,000. Vanished in the time it takes to blink. We didn't even hear it happen. We just got a brief email. Partnership has been reevaluated. Scope no longer aligns with our brand integrity. The irony was cruel. All that control, all that obsession with the tiniest details. And it had slipped through because of one choice made at 2:03 a.m. by someone who hadn't slept in days. By me. Not that Sophia ever said it. She never mentioned my name. Never pointed a finger. But she didn't have to. The silence was its own kind of verdict. My inbox stopped receiving anything except status updates. The next event was reassigned. I was thanked in the quarterly meeting, but not by her. The week after, Eli filed for divorce. Quietly, efficiently, as if he'd been waiting for one final sign. Vendors who once bragged about working with us stopped returning calls. 2 employees left without notice. 1 joined a competitor. The facade cracked. And underneath it? Exhaustion. Burnout. Resentment. We hadn't built a brand. We'd built a glass palace. And when it shattered, all that was left was the echo of applause that never came. It didn't hit me right away. Not after the banner, or the blow-up, or even the $50,000 loss. It crept in later, weeks after the venue had emptied and the headlines had cooled, when my calendar remained suspiciously blank and my phone stayed silent. In the quiet, I saw everything more clearly. Not just the mistake, but the entire structure we had built around a woman who couldn't let go. Sophia wasn't a villain. That would be too easy. She was brilliant. She had vision, taste, a sixth sense for market timing. But she also had a need so deep it bled through the seams of everything she touched. The need to control. To command beauty into being. To force the world to match the image in her head, no matter the cost. And we, the ones who worked under her, didn't just enable it. We breathed it in. We adopted it as gospel. Perfection became the baseline. And anything less, any shade off, any step late, was a threat to the order we were told was the only path to success. But perfection doesn't build loyalty. It builds fear. And fear is quiet until it breaks. I think about Eli sometimes. The way he hovered just outside her orbit, always in frame but never quite present. I used to think he was lucky, cushioned in privilege, shielded from the chaos of our grind. But now I see it differently. He was collateral. A life shaped to fit her outline. A man muted so her image could sing louder. The saddest part? He never even raised his voice. He just slipped away, like water draining from a glass that cracked months ago. The team fractured too. The ones who stayed moved differently, heads down, smiles tighter. Trust had eroded. Not just in her, but in the promise that any of it had been worth it. Because here's the thing about chasing control. The more you grip, the more you lose. What happened at the launch wasn't about a banner. It wasn't about color values or sponsor expectations. It was about the lie we all bought, that spectacle could replace connection. That if we could just polish hard enough, fast enough, no one would see the cracks in the floor beneath us. But people do see. They always see. Eventually, Sophia's brand survived, technically. The product shipped. Sales dipped, then recovered. But something vital didn't return. The mystique. The magnetism. The thing that made people want to belong to her vision. That's what control takes from you in the end. Not just people, but the intimacy of imperfection, the thing that makes humans trust you, believe you, root for you. When I think back now, I don't feel anger. I feel sorrow. Sorrow for a woman who built a kingdom of glass, too afraid to let anyone inside. Sorrow for the team who sacrificed sleep, sanity, and health to keep the dream upright. And sorrow for myself for not speaking up, for ignoring the instinct that whispered this isn't sustainable long before the meltdown came. A simple mistake cost us $50,000. But the real loss was harder to price. It was the relationships, the respect, the moments we could have said enough, but didn't. Next time, I'll listen to the flinch. Next time, I'll trade spectacle for substance. Next time, I'll remember that control is a cage. And that freedom, real freedom, lives in the mess we try so hard to hide. Months have passed. Seasons shifted. The world moved on as it always does. New launches filled the headlines. Sophia's name faded into the background noise of the next big thing. But something in me didn't quite reset. I left the company 2 months after the event. Not with a bang, just an email, a quiet offboarding call, a shipping label for my laptop. No hard feelings, no scandal. Just a silent decision to step away from the machine. For a while, I couldn't walk into any glossy venue without feeling a twitch in my chest. Couldn't look at a branded banner without scanning it for flaws. My body had memorized the panic, like a muscle memory of a place I no longer wanted to live in. I started freelancing. Smaller clients. Slower projects. Fewer filters. It felt like breathing again. I met people who led with vulnerability instead of volume. Clients who didn't expect brilliance at 2 a.m. or blood in exchange for beauty. It was strange at first, like living without armor. But then I remembered, armor gets heavy. Especially when no one asked you to wear it in the first place. Sometimes I still think about that day. The lights, the hum, the moment the projection hit the wall. I remember Sophia's face, not the rage, but the second before it, the heartbreak. That tiny flash of how could this happen to me, the betrayal of the world not bending to her will. It wasn't just a meltdown. It was grief. Grief for a version of herself she'd spent years trying to perfect, one that shattered because the world refused to play along. And maybe that's the real lesson. Perfection is brittle. Control is expensive. But honesty, messy, unpredictable honesty, is the only thing that can survive the fall. Now, when clients ask about branding, I talk less about polish and more about presence. About showing up real, even when real isn't photogenic. Because the most expensive mistake I ever witnessed didn't cost us 50 grand. It cost us the truth. And I don't intend to lose it again.